Welcome back to my disembodied voice. One thing which has been constant in horror's expansive methods of scaring people over the decades is its use of masks, be it Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Leatherface, The Strangers, those sociopaths in The Purge, or even Blumhouse's recent The Black Phone. Covering the face of the antagonist has been crucial in making these films work. However, modern times are seemingly calling studios for more progressive solutions, and on the flip side to horror, Disney have recently stated they don't want to use masks or associate masks with any kind of disfigurement. And that's partly why Kylo Ren got to pretty much use his mask like a hat, as he took it on and off all the time. Also, with the likes of Russell T Davies on Doctor Who and the BFI stating that they don't want to conflate disfigurement and disability with evil, masked and scarred villains are on the way out because of a, quite frankly, ridiculous pandering by people who are missing the point entirely. Now, this isn't going to be a video essay attacking that particularly ridiculous form of thinking, because I want to focus on horror, be it the great and good of the past or hopefully the future writers who are in love with the genre and now penciling their screenplays, and look at the psychological reasons why masks are a vital component in scaring people and, more to the point, why we find them so unsettling. So, for today's video, join me as we look at the psychology of masks in horror, why they frighten us, why they're so effective, how they affect the brain, and also just why they bother us so much. Now, if you've watched any of my past videos, you will have heard me talk about non-verbal communication, and this is perhaps the most crucial aspect when it comes to the use of masks. Over 70% of all communication between people is non-verbal, and that means just as little as 30% revolves around speech and its content. Take dating, for example, and imagine you were going on a hot date with someone such as, Christina Hendricks, and picture how important the way you act and put yourself across would matter during that date. Now, not only do you have to be charming, witty, intelligent, use a nice tone of voice and ensure that your speech content is decent, you also need to think about what you're wearing, how you're sitting, are you eating with your mouth closed, and also your eye contact. And that's because we all make an impact upon first glance before we even say a word, and it takes approximately 0.7 seconds for an assumption to be made, and inside those milliseconds we are already deciding whether or not this date will continue. So before any words leave anyone's mouth, we see an image and form a direct opinion. Now that opinion, although it's subjective, then becomes stronger or weaker the more time we spend with the person. But whilst I'm eating dinner across the table from Miss Hendricks, I'm also constantly being evaluated by her. So if I slump, look at my phone all the time, don't laugh at her jokes, start checking out another girl, chewing with my mouth open or rolling my eyes, Christina Hendricks isn't going to be very impressed, and the date's not going to go very well because my entire face and body language creates an aura. And it's especially worth noting that one of the main reasons for attraction is visual. We see people, we fancy them. It's one of the most important things. Yes, we can get onto the inside and how someone's beautiful, has a great personality, but the majority of the time we look at someone and go, whoa, you're hot. And that's why when you see an advert with someone like Chris Hemsworth or Margot Robbie in it, regardless of what they're advertising, you're going to stop for a second and have a quick drool at the TV because they make you feel nice inside. And the reason for this is that faces are a central feature of our highly social species. From attachment theory in infants to choosing a sexual partner in adulthood, faces represent familiarity, safety, attraction, comfort, and the more benign the face and the more congruent its expression, the more comfortable we feel. And congruence is the key here, and it's something I also talk about a lot because congruence means agreement, harmony, compatibility, and the one thing that masks do is disturb the natural congruity of seeing someone's face, and it removes the familiarity, humanity, and a Rolodex of uncertainty spins in our mind, and a bit like a puzzle, when we only have 50% of the correct information, our minds are constantly guessing and wondering, and over time, this leads to unease and panic. It's also worth noting that unease and panic can also happen in that first 0.7 seconds of looking at someone. After all, if someone's got a great big clown mask on and it's covered in blood, you're hardly going to go, might be worth giving that guy a chance. So even without our mouths to speak, our facial expressions communicate volumes about our emotions and our reactions to events around us. Eye tracking studies have shown that an hour after birth, infants spend more time tracking face-like drawings than drawings containing scrambled versions of the same elements. And in his pioneering work, The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals, by Charles Darwin in 1899, he suggested that several basic emotions are characterized by specific facial expressions and that even people who are born blind display them. And this is important because when you look at someone, you can tell if they are listening, surprised, bored, attracted to you, or just humouring you. Humans rely on facial expressions for so many things, and when you remove all of that code, our neocortexes need to match and make judgments, or if our frontal lobes don't have the visual information to make a connection, we create incongruence, anxiety, and trepidation. After all, try going on a date with both of you wearing masks. The whole evening would be a truly uncomfortable affair, as not only would you not know what your partner looked like, but you wouldn't be able to guess if they were into you or even listening to you at times, because their facial expressions wouldn't be able to match the visual cues your brains need to progress the relationship. In horror, masks are intentionally grim or blank to show an absence. Now that may be an absence of humanity like in Michael Myers in Halloween, but the symbolism of the unknown and anonymity are important, and we immediately identify these people as the bad guys because their body language is incompatible with the frozen face which is their mask. Also, imagination is vital in this because when we cannot see something, our frontal lobes start imagining things, and quite often these are mixed and matched with the visual memories we have stored in our neocortexes. Now, this may be from previous horror films, or just that expression your creepy uncle used to have, or maybe it's from something more horrific in your past, like a trauma. Or it may be from just seeing pictures when you were young, but the absence of a face and a false visage of a fixed expression naturally engenders the fight or flight response and creates connotations of danger. Take the masks in The Purge and The Black Phone. Both of these have a fixed and exaggerated smile, which in itself is highly incongruent. Nobody smiles all the time because a smile doesn't match up to every emotion. So when a stranger is approaching you and smiling with a fixed grin, it creates a short circuit of discomfort in your brain. Let me explain. Smiles have an emotional meaning and come out of context. They signify happiness, friendship, benignity, attraction, lust, love, contentment. However, with social compliance, there are gradients of smiling. A nurse might smile genially at someone she's about to take blood from, but that comes in context with verbal reassurance, the uniform she wears, and trust. However, if that nurse was just to stand there with a big fixed grin and not say anything, then several facets start to raise red flags. A smile is brief and matches eye contact. A smile comes with words, and if our nurse just stood there with a wide and exaggerated smile, then we would question her intent and the trust would soon dissipate. Now, when someone comes out the dark or is staring at you and their mask is smiling, then it distorts something very vital. Empathy. We smile to show we are listening, that we care, and that we're interested, and we also smile to show we are no threat. But when someone's body language is rigid and predatory, or you are alone, or there are sexual threats, such as a man watching a woman, for example, or they have a weapon, or, like in The Purge, they are openly hunting someone to kill, then the empathy is inverted. Now we have menace because the smile isn't trying to bond or reassure us. It's about showing the opposite to empathy, and that could be emptiness, anger, sadism, rage, or hatred. The smile still has connotations, but our minds have now recognised danger. The imagination is racing at who or what is behind the mask, and the fixed expression doesn't match the emotion. It's why clowns freak people out so much, because to all intents and purposes, they are childhood jesters and painted to resemble funny and humorous entertainers, but through horror films and also real life killer clowns like John Wayne Gacy, our connotations to that changes. Also, depending on height, gender and weight, someone leering over you whilst making jokes again hides the emotional cues, makes you uncomfortable, and as their makeup is designed to exaggerate their facial features, our brains know all emotions are always in flux, and therefore a fixed smile disrupts that basic understanding and tenets of emotional cues that emotions are in flux and they are responsive to what's going on around them. A fixed one doesn't. It won't change regardless. Therefore, it makes us uncomfortable. The higher level systems in the frontal cortex are involved in prevention and planning of avoidance when the threat is not yet imminent. And this dynamic interplay between higher level volitional planning of escape strategies and automated fight or flight provides effective means for optimizing survival strategies at multiple timescales. This is why approaching a fearful situation feels so unnerving. And when being stalked or approached by someone, a single expression which is fixed is a clear red flag because nobody has one single facial expression all the time. And we know instantly from this threat that there is deception and subterfuge because not only is there anonymity and incongruity, but the features don't correlate to the body language or the intent. And it's here that we come back to our old friend neuro-linguistic programming and the importance of non-verbal communication and the interpretation of information through our senses. If I approached you baring my teeth or raising my arms or holding a weapon, then you have several immediate visual clues which trip the risk assessment and survival mechanisms in your brain. It's the same thing as when you're flirting with someone and you know you have their eye contact, smile and focus. Once one of these facially attentive cues dies or drops, you know the person isn't into you. And the same happens when someone wants to hurt you, as their visual cues and non-verbal body language highlights immediate problems. Now, horror movies works a lot around these senses, and it mixes the auditory and visual, as movies don't really have taste, touch or smell, to trigger these fear-ingrained memories which have been coded via the amygdala into the hippocampus, which is the centre of the brain's memory bank. It's why they use darkness, storms, the sound of rain, and the music is spiky chords. Brilliant, isn't it? The sounds and the music fit together. However, let's swap the music and do it again. Not quite as effective, is it? And immediately that pulls you out of the mood that's being set. And as darkness, storms, unknown locations and the vulnerability of being alone causes empathy, as we have all faced real-life sensory information like cold, dark, storms and so forth, the aim is to attach sensory cues and clues to what you're watching to get you in the mood and start tripping those fear sensors. Mood is important here, much like you might want to seduce someone with candles, low light and a bit of Barry White music. You wouldn't appear in a kimono with a romantic dinner on the table and play as this would just kill the eroticism. So, back to horror. You're in the mood. The visual and sound stimuli are all in play, and we come to the mask, and this is very much about absence. In Carpenter's original Halloween, we meet Michael Myers as he escapes from prison, but we don't really see his face. From then on, bar the ill-advised scene at the end where the mask is ripped off by Laurie Strode, I've never liked that scene personally. I think his face should have remained hidden throughout. We have a silent creature and a fixed expression as he wears his spray-painted William Shatner mask. Carpenter uses the ghostly white face against a hue of blues and blacks, but crucially, we are filled in with some aoral information from Loomis about Myers' evil, inhumanity and absence. And after Loomis has explained all this, we then get to see close-ups of the mask, and we're missing the eyes, which are the window to the soul. The mask is also pale, it's ethereal and haunting, and the expression doesn't change no matter what he does. Also, as mentioned before, the colour scheme is important here. Much of Halloween is filmed in the dark, and Michael Myers' face is bright white, and it's a ghostly apparition that appears in the corner of the frame to start unnerving us. As stated before, the expression on masks don't change, and expressions are everything, and you can recognize a slight change in emotion within a split second of interaction. After all, try telling a joke or giving a compliment and getting the wrong facial expression and feel the cringe or awkwardness rush to your heart. And just having one expression means our frontal lobes and emotive limbic system are missing crucial information on reading social cues, compliance, and also trying to establish what the other person is thinking. So the mask is an absence of many things, and in turn we have an absence of information and thus an absence of humanity. Jason Voorhees, on the other hand, in terms of his mask, it has no facial delineations because it's a hockey mask. It doesn't have a smile, smirk, or even a gormless delineation of a face, and thus we are drawn to the eyes as there is no mouth or familiarity, and this obfuscates even further. Now, all the little holes in the mask, the tint, the dirty and unkempt look, tell us everything we need to know, as if it were a clean and new mask, then it still hides the face, but it would give off a different vibe to a mask which is cracked, filthy, and unkempt. We may not know the face, but dirt, grime, and dilapidation are visual signifiers of someone who has connotations to vagrancy, and the lack of self-care suggests unpredictability, uncertainty, and neglect. Uncertainty is stressful and it fuels our fears and anxiety. One of the major functions of the brain is learning how to reduce uncertainty about the environment and allow the individual to better predict what will happen next. When these predictions are difficult to make, we experience the situation as unnerving, and fear of the unknown might actually be the most fundamental fear in humans, and it explains a multitude of other fears. We're afraid of darkness because we never know what's hiding. We are wary of strangers because we do not know how they will behave. We find abandoned places creepy because we do not know why they have been deserted and what happened there to cause such dilapidation, wreck and ruin. And the same can be said of masks, for when there is a fixed expression, or there's a filthy mask without a human shape, there's an absence and an uncertainty which creates unpredictability. Anonymity permits freedom from consequence, and therefore it permits an even more dangerous aura. Therefore, in a movie like The Strangers, where their masks are somewhat clownish, cartoony, adolescent, and almost playful, and thus signifies their delinquency, they are worn to both highlight threat and also protect the anonymity so no identification can be made. Again, as the masks are donned after the initial "Is Tamara home?" moments of dark obscurity and playful knock and run, once the victims are engaged in full violent hostility, the childlike masks are both incongruent to the level of violence, and their fixed expressions suggest both incongruence of intent and also the aforementioned absence of identifiable information for the viewer to interpret. Faces are everything, and that's one of the reasons that in 2021 alone, the cosmetics industry was worth $238 billion, because how we look is crucial to our careers, ability to find a sexual partner, approachability of potential friends, and our general way of getting attention. And that's why the best horror masks hint at an abyssal identity, like the holes in the one worn by Jason, or the nondescript blankness of the one worn by Michael Myers, or the playful and almost Victorian-era clowns of the ones in The Strangers, or the burlap sack, of course, or even the crude flesh collage work of those worn by Leatherface in the many Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. Let's look at a brain MRI scan, which was detailing fear and uncertainty when it came to masks and horror, and see how the increased activity is in something called the inferior occipital gyrus. The inferior occipital gyrus has been found to be related to the visual function of processing faces and is connected to the amygdala via white matter connectivity. This allows the inferior occipital gyrus to form a network of facial recognition with the amygdala, and it's one of the reasons you light up when you see your crush, or you feel a consuming envy when you see someone you're in competition with. The occipital lobe is the visual processing area of the brain. It is associated with visual spatial processing, distance and depth perception, colour determination, object, face recognition, expression recognition, and memory formation. Going back to neuro-linguistic programming, your entire frame of reference, how you see the world, your personality, your judgments, everything, it all comes through your senses, and that's important. And when parts of the brain, like the occipital lobe, encode that, it's how we store a representation of the world. Anyway, back to our MRI scan, and when a face is obscured and we have an absence or an incongruity, the area will light up even more, as the amygdala is located in the temporal lobe, which processes emotion, memory, and communication, and this is hot-wired to the inferior occipital gyrus. And it's this reason that masks are so scary, because it obstructs, obfuscates, and disrupts these pathways and breaks up the connection between emotion, visual processing, risk assessment, and comprehension of visual cues. Throughout history, our ancestors have worn masks of one kind or another for the purpose of entertainment, mockery, ritual, protection, concealment, and transformation. The higher level systems in the frontal cortex are involved in prevention and planning and avoidance when threat is not yet imminent, and this dynamic interplay between higher level volitional planning of escape strategies and automated fight or flight provides effective means for optimizing survival strategies. Your frontal lobe is responsible for higher cognitive functions such as memory, emotions, impulse control, problem solving, social interaction, and motor function, and added to the occipital lobe's facial processing and the emotivity processing of the temporal lobe, the interplay across the neocortex, which crosses 4 of the 6 lobes of the brain and covers many high processing jobs, you can see why masks interrupt the cognition and cause such unease. Of course, Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers are now pop culture icons, and their masks have taken on an identity of themselves and are kind of recognisable faces in their own way. And if you go to horror conventions, you'll see hundreds of them, as people like to dress up as them. And also, sometimes horror creators can try too hard with the masks and they just aren't scary because they don't trip at cerebral hot wiring. But all in all, masks are fantastic in horror and a great way of getting the viewer on edge and creating uncertainty. After all, odd body language, a rigid posture, crossed with one facial expression, or an expressionless face which hides the eyes and has an unnerving smile, play to the most primal parts of our brains. And be it a gas mask, hockey mask, clown mask, spray-painted William Shatner mask, or just a burlap sack with a smile drawn on it, the incongruence, absence, and threat of not being able to read the face which is stalking you is utterly terrifying. Masks don't mean a movie is scary, but it adds an extra layer of subliminal discomfort, and you're sat there left wondering, what face is behind that mask? It'll be interesting in the comments section below to see what people's favourite horror masks are, or what's really disturbed you about masks in the films you've watched. Anyway, that's it for this week's video, so remember that psychology is cool. Please like, share, and most of all subscribe, as more subs means more vids, and I can continue this journey of exploring the mashup of movies and psychology. Oh, and healthy debate is always good, so please leave a comment too. And, as ever, until next time, I'll catch you later.